Gaming is on the edge of everything technologically. If you want to go into FANG, you can have a boring career as an engineer. If you want to have fun and solve crazy hard problems, go into game dev. We won't get the next hit game while people are scared to be creative or scared to do exciting things. We have a generation of engineers who never had to mentor anybody. And we'll eventually have a generation of engineers who were never mentored themselves by anyone other than ChatGPT. What do you do when you don't have a talent pool to pull from? And you don't have time to mentor people to bring them up. And your talent pipeline is looking slimmer and slimmer and slimmer every day. There is no incentive to care about the long term. Herein lies the tragedy of the commons. All we care about is short-term stock gains. There's gonna come a point where we realize, like, we screwed up, and then how do you recover? There are so many industries where your employees will not care. Yeah. This is one of the few where people care deeply and don't take that for granted.
Carly, how are you doing?
I'm doing so well, Ben. So nice to see you.
You as well. Thanks for coming on. I want to give you a second here to just introduce yourself. Give everybody, who are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Carly Taylor. Like Ben said, started my career in game development working on Call of Duty. That was a behemoth. I learned everything like drinking from the fire hose. And I've recently moved on from Call of Duty. I'm now at Databricks. So we are working on bringing a unified platform for game data and AI to anyone and everyone who's interested in learning more from their data for gaming. So still in the industry, still helping out, still get to do engineering and data stuff. But now the scope of what I'm doing is a little more broad. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Okay. I like starting off with a big question just to get us talking about state of game dev.
Cool.
So it's been an interesting last few years. What's your take? What do you see in the state of game dev, both past, present, future?
Oh, my perspective is different depending on, I guess, what lens I'm viewing it from. When I think about the themes of this conversation, where we're talking about engineering and people really wanting to break into game dev, I think that it's probably harder than ever to get into this industry, which is a shame because there's so many people who are so passionate about it, who want to learn and who want to get into gaming and make an impact. And there are so many opportunities to make amazing games. And I feel like there is some sort of disconnect between the passion that we see with people, with gamers, with engineers, and the way that they're being leveraged and utilized and brought up, and the way that we're actually executing as game devs. And I think just overall, like always, gaming is on the edge of everything technologically. I always joke that if you want to go into FANG, you can have a boring career as an engineer. If you want to have fun and solve crazy hard problems, go into game dev. And I think that holds true, right? We think of these big companies, in like the Netflixes of the world, and we think that they're doing the crazy hard things. And I would say, I think that gaming companies are doing way harder, way cooler stuff at the edge of technology. And so that means that there's always an envelope being pushed. There's always some new AI is coming. There's always just some new thing that's coming that's going to disrupt or change the way that we work. Gaming is always on the forefront of that, from my opinion. But then it's like, how do we not get over our skis? And how do we actually make sure and look around us that we're still doing what we're here to do, which is make great games for players, right? That's the unifying aspect of why all of us do this. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the industry right now.
Okay, so there's one lens. Do you want to jump to another one, or is that the good summation?
I think if I put on my executive hat, like I own a game studio or I'm trying to make a game, I think that the flip side is true in that it looks like there is infinite opportunity, which is always good because that enables people to step away from fear of executing, fear of losing, fear of whatever, and actually dive in and make awesome things happen, right? Because we won't get the next hit game while people are scared to be creative or scared to innovate or scared to do exciting things, right? And I think the future of technology is making it look even more possible to pull off the impossible. And so I think it's an interesting juxtaposition where I think that leaders see a lot of potential. They see gaming as this new realm where, the more we get players, like the infinite number of players that there are in markets like India, China, right? Like it's just growing consistently. That opportunity is juxtaposed so starkly with where I see engineers feeling like there aren't opportunities. And I spend a
Mm.
lot of time thinking why that is.
Okay, I kind of want to let's shift then. Let's shift into state of game engineering. So,
Yeah.
engineering feeling constrained, feeling like there aren't opportunities. What's driving that?
Okay, so I'll step back a little bit
Hmm.
and say that my view on this is definitely influenced by what I experienced early in my career. So I started my career actually as a chemist. I wasn't involved in game dev at all. I went to school for chemistry. When I finished grad school, I was looking for jobs like everyone does. And a couple of things became apparent to me that I think the world is now clear on as well. Number one, this was back in 2017. There were no manufacturing jobs left in the US where I could go work as a chemist like in a lab, right? No one's
Mm.
really making, maybe some people are making like detergents stateside, but a lot of that had been shipped overseas. Okay, so the industry's shrinking, at least stateside. Then the people who would have been retiring or moving on or doing different things with their careers or getting promoted, the older engineers, that wasn't happening. They weren't retiring. There was a lot of uncertainty. So all of the awesome roles that you wanted were taken by somebody with 20 years of experience. And they weren't going to leave anytime soon
Right.
because they couldn't and because there was too much uncertainty for them to do so. And that actually is why I shifted into tech, was because I was like, there's just not, I was sold this dream. STEM is the way to go. You'll be able to work anywhere. That didn't end up being true. And now I see the parallels for that in engineering. We have a lot of amazing engineers in game dev. Actually, probably the smartest people I know right now work in game engineering. And they're going to stay put because the fear and uncertainty of moving on or retiring or anything, it's just not a viable option anymore. So
Mm.
then what does the path look like if you're a new engineer? Like how do you break into that where we have a lot of highly skilled engineers and then we have a lot of highly skilled engineers from other areas and industries who are coming into gaming. Like for juniors then there's really no place for them, right? Like we're all just
Yeah.
picking from this seemingly infinite pool of senior talent.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's a compound too right now with two things. One, you have the industry contraction, obviously. That's leading to people going like, well, wait a minute. Obviously, if I'm going to hang on to anybody, I want to hang on to my senior folks. Um, and you also have this mass of like this wasn't a thing I think 20 years ago. You didn't have as many people graduating from college with
Mm-hmm.
degrees like game engineering, whereas now someone comes out of school and they're like, hi, I just got a bachelor's in engineering and game design or something like
Yep.
that, and that person's expecting or looking and seeking out this job, and so you have the shape of who wants to be in the industry is just like ballooning at the bottom. But again, number of roles is, even if it's growing, it's hardly keeping up. It's not keeping up with how much. And I would argue that at times, especially right now with the contraction, it's not growing. With so many layoffs, instead, it's what would you say, an employer's market of I can find whoever I want. I can probably pay them less than I was paying them several years ago, and they'll be happy to work here.
Yes.
And this led. So the reason I contacted you, had this great post on LinkedIn that talked about this problem. You wrote about this idea of like what is happening to our engineering talent pipeline in game dev, because I'm not seeing juniors getting picked up. I'm not seeing good mentoring. It feels like we've almost abandoned the idea of, hey, there's a future generation of game engineers. And I'm paraphrasing what you said, but it was something to this effect of like, this is going to cause issues down the road. Are we seeing this? So can you just like dig more into that for me?
Of course. Yeah. So I think the premise of this actually came from talking to a friend who's an economist. And he was explaining this idea of the tragedy of the commons.
Hmm.
which is if you have a common resource where everyone is pulling from this shared common resource, like fisheries in the ocean are often, used as an example. Everyone is going to use this common resource for their own benefit to the point where the common resource becomes depleted because there's no reason to be altruistic when pulling from some sort of common resource, and nobody's looking out for the resource unless there's regulation. And so eventually, you deplete these fisheries in that example. And I see the senior engineering talent market the exact same way. And I know that this is true across industries, but I see it a lot in game dev, wherein, right, you need to deliver tomorrow. That's how it always is in game dev, right? We're
Yeah.
always on a tight schedule and 99% of the time we're behind. That's just the reality of making games. And so when you're on a tight deadline schedule and you're on a tight schedule to produce, you're looking for people who can make immediate impact, right? And one would think, okay, well, someone graduating with a game dev degree, even though they're junior, is likely to be able to make impact. And where I'm seeing this get compounded is that a lot of studios have been working for so long, either their engine is proprietary or their engineering practices have become so insular that there isn't a good, even schools that teach this, I don't know that there's a really, really good preparation pipeline for what it's really like to make games because you
Yeah.
can't emulate that in a classroom,
Yeah.
right? It is so hard to
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
someone what it's like to go through a launch where your systems are under strain of 4 or 5 million people logging in from all over the world. Like it's just such a unique engineering problem and such a unique space that even the best talent comes in and doesn't really know what's going on.
Hmm.
So we have all these senior engineers, right? And right now it's okay because if you have the money, which a lot of the bigger game studios are still willing to pay for this talent, you can pull from that common resource, right? That's the common pool, is the pool of senior engineering talent. But eventually, if we're not replenishing the fishery by training and mentoring junior engineers, there will come a point where there aren't senior engineers anymore. Like it's not that
Right.
hard to imagine. Senior engineers don't just grow on trees.
Yeah.
They are mentored. They are, in fact, created in a good engineering environment, right? Like they're trained and taught and brought up, and they become your 10x engineers, but they weren't born that way. And it's sad because if you've seen, the state of our oceans, you understand that this isn't a sustainable practice. And if we apply
Yeah.
it to the game dev industry, there will come a time where we're on, because the pressures will never stop to deliver tomorrow. And then what do you do when you don't have a talent pool to pull from? And you don't have time to mentor people to bring them up. And your talent pipeline is looking slimmer and slimmer and slimmer every day. And we're not working together to train these people, right? It's feast or famine for each studio. It's kind of like I got mine, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're an indie studio, it's even harder. Like you have to shell out some serious money to compete with the big boys to get someone who's already good,
Yeah.
right? And if you are a good indie studio and you're like, you know what, screw this, I'm going to mentor junior engineers. I'm going to do my part. What happens? The junior engineers get some experience and then they get a huge paycheck to go to AAA and they leave. So, and then you're left footing the bill for their
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting problem that I think highlights some incentive problems in the engineering employment market.
It's funny. You mentioned the idea of fisheries, and I can't remember exactly where, but I remember seeing somebody talking about there were reports back in the day of you being able to like put a hat in the ocean and catch fish, right? If you just had like a decent sized hat, you could just put it in the ocean, and there were just so many fish in the sea, right? And
Fishermen everywhere are like, what
yeah,
the heck?
and it's interesting to compare that to this idea of engineering and go. It's weird. We actually have a massive number of like potential fish in the sea, but we don't trust or want to invest or again want to take care of that as some sort of resource that may at some point not be there. And I love what you said too about that idea. Like one of the things that happened, especially once COVID occurred and remote became more common, I remember talking about this even like a few years ago. I was just managing and mentoring is very difficult remotely. It's not impossible, but it's difficult, and most people don't know how to do it. And so much of your training and mentoring was osmotic, I guess. Like it was just I'm surrounded. What do you do when a new like I was the guy who did seating when we were all in office, right? Where do I put a junior engineer? I don't put all my junior engineers together. I put my junior engineer between a mid and a senior, and I tell the mid, hey, your job is to make sure the junior succeeds, and the senior's there as like oversight and like. I'm trying to set you up to have people who can put eyes on your stuff. And I recognize that's a little bit of a tax on both of them. But that's okay because they're developing some of their leadership and collaboration capability, and you're developing now as a better engineer. And there's like a win all around. And suddenly in a remote world, it's like, whoa, like this sort of proximity-based system falls apart. And again, I don't think it's impossible, but I understood in a short-term frame why so many people were just like, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire seniors. And not only am I going to hire only seniors, I'm going to hire only seniors who have experience building in the engine and genre I am already in. And especially once layoffs started happening, like before layoffs, they just started paying unreal sums of money to those people. But once the layoffs started happening, it was just, oh, now I get to pick. So yeah, my engine, my genre, you need to have 5 years of experience or whatever. And like, if you haven't done the exact matchmaking tool I'm trying to build in the game, I'm not interested. And they could find that person. And so it was this huge shift in terms of like how people were thinking about this. I think, again, that was another variable in this. Do you see other factors impacting that right now? Like other things that are causing that failure to develop the fishery?
I think too there's an issue now is that we have a generation of senior engineers who don't know how to do what you just described. Even if you had them in an office and you sat a junior engineer next to them, would they be adequately prepared to mentor?
Oh man, I
Because
hadn't even
it's
thought
not
about
an
that.
easy thing, right? Like
Yeah,
helping someone understand things without just telling them the answer, but really like bringing someone up in an environment where they can be effective, transforming them into that 10x engineer, learning best practices. Now you have an even smaller pool. You have senior engineers who have those capabilities and those leadership capabilities and who want to do it, right? But you're not letting them learn how to do that either. And so even if we started tomorrow and we said, okay, we're going to bring back all of our mentorship programs, we'd have to find super senior engineers to mentor the senior engineers so that they knew how to mentor the junior engineers
right.
because we have a generation of engineers who never had to mentor anybody. And we'll eventually have a generation of engineers who were never mentored themselves by anyone other than ChatGPT. And
That's
like
kind of
that's a crazy
terrifying.
thought too.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that other perspective, and that's so true that just trying to level someone else is its own skill set. That again, you kind of 10 years ago when I was at Wright, like I just took for granted. Like I
Yeah.
could, and there was always like maybe there was a crotchety engineer who was like we don't that's not a mentoring engineer, but like most you actually that was a ding in some sense on in terms of performance, like performance evaluation and stuff like that. You wanted the senior engineers to be able to very easily step into roles of being able to help someone along. And yeah, I just hadn't thought about like we've gone now through about 5 years of that not really being an expectation.
Yep. I think we see this when I think about COVID, the big conversation now is we talk about children who were in school during COVID, right? And like their math and their reading scores and things that we're realizing now upon reflection were harmed. And I'm not a proponent of being in the office. Let me be extraordinarily clear. I'm in my office right now. This is my house. I love this. But there is there are just inarguable damages that were caused by bringing kids home from school. And I think we're probably going to see something similar in the work environment where there will be a time where we look back and we say, wow, we have a generation of employees who don't really know how to help each other. When we say, like, we're a team, no one really knows what that means. And
Yeah.
it's going to perpetuate silos in engineering, which is already a problem, right? You don't want to be duplicating work. Like in data, especially, silos are a big issue. And things like this don't help because if you're not rewarding senior engineers for having camaraderie and mentoring and helping, and you're only looking at baseline metrics of tickets completed and features, put out the door, then you're in essence telling them that's all that matters. So spending any amount of time helping someone else is inherently a waste of time because it will hinder your growth in the company. And I don't know. I think that
Yeah.
there's going to come a point where we realize like we screwed up and then how do you recover?
If you lead teams in game or software development and you're tired of wasteful and unreliable estimation, I've built an online course just for you. It's called Advanced Estimation for Game and Software Development, and it's a self-paced course with over 15 hours of content, real-world examples, and tools you can start using right away. Estimation doesn't have to be a morale-draining mess. Planning doesn't have to feel unrealistic and contrived. You can do better, and this course will help. Early access is now open with lifetime access and a big launch discount, but there's limited seats at this price point. Check it out at this URL or in the show notes below. There's something else that emerged too as you bring that up. I think about that productivity became such a term that people throw around, and productivity has to me always been so interesting. It's like, how exactly are you measuring that? I have a book next to me called Software Estimation because I'm that sort of weirdo, but it has in there like different ways that they attempted to estimate and measure software output. And, people tried lines of code, which was obviously a disaster, and they tried function
That's
points
Elon
and all these
Musk's
different things,
favorite,
right?
isn't
What?
it? Like Elon Musk's favorite metric is how many lines of code you've written.
Oh, really? Is it really? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. No,
which
not,
is a
not a good,
hilarious
not a good metric.
not correlated.
Not a good metric. But they, there's all these different attempts that have been made, and I think when a lot of people got really excited. I'm also a fan of remote work. This is my office. I really like it for all the advantages, and simultaneously, to your point, there are significant trade-offs, and one of them is we got this real intense focus on productivity, and to your point around being teammates, we didn't realize we were losing on the collaborative aspect, and games especially are so dependent on that collaborative aspect. Like I sort of joke or say, for a game to be successful, a sufficient number of disciplines all kind of have to hit a home run at the same time, and you don't know exactly which ones, and you don't know exactly how much of a home run, but like, you can't just have everybody do sufficiently productive work. It has to come together into something, and if you can't talk with each other, if you're not equipped to do that, trained to do that, like, and I again, things we took for granted growing up in offices was I'm just talking with people all the time. I'm having hallway conversations, running into someone at on the way to the bathroom or whatever, like between meetings, whatever it might be. I was a producer. I was in a lot of meetings. But like you get that, and now just gone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sitting here being productive, and I'm like, are you being productive and effective, or are you just being productive? What else do you see in state of game engineering right now?
I see a lot of excitement and new tech being deployed. I see people, AI, it's funny because AI and game dev, right, going back 20 years is like the first time I ever even heard the term AI, right? And like game developers have been building AI in some form forever. And now there was a time where generative AI and AI in video games was kind of like what do you guys want? Keep your buzzwords out of our game. And I think game engineers are so funny to me and game producers because their like, excuse my language, bullshit meters are turned up to 10. Like they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear your buzzwords. They don't want to be sold your whatever, because they've heard it all before, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone knows that they have their job to get done.
Well, Web3 was going to change the world, right?
So, of course, right? Like we're in the metaverse. So anyway, so they're very good at like picking that out and being like, mm-mm. So AI was like that for a little while. They were like, we've had AI. Welcome to the party. Like we don't need you guys coming in here and explaining AI to us. But now I see people actually understanding what specifically LLMs can do for games and world immersion and world building. And I think that's so exciting. And I get excited about it from the perspective of this is a new technical problem that's going to be a pain in the A to solve because all sorts of reasons, right? People don't really know this. Game servers don't have GPUs. Why would they? They don't need to render video. So you can't just run an LLM on a game server. Like things like that that you don't think about, that you're like,
Mm,
okay, then how would we do inference? How would we build an LLM into our game to make NPCs more dynamic, to make the world more dynamic, to make it adjust in difficulty levels? All the things that game devs have always wanted to do, right? Because we're
hmm
always in the search of more immersive and dynamic worlds. Now it seems like that is within reach, but it's still really hard, which is
hmm
like the perfect place for a problem to be for game devs because they love the hard and they love when they can see something, but it's just a little bit technically impossible.
So it sounds like I actually I've had a lot of different talks with different people about AI, and some people are again in that total like, nope, this is nonsense. I don't trust it.
The
I don't want to mess with it.
buzzword.
Yeah. And others are like, the potential here is unreal. I think there are some things that are. It's an obvious game changer in a space. Like a simple example is localization. There's just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, like localization is a completely new field now
Yeah.
because AI can just do that at a fraction of the cost. Where do you sit on that? Where like it sounds like you're seeing some of that potential, you're seeing some of that possibility, and also going like that is a very difficult thing that requires some rethinking of how we as engineers sort of frame the world, is what I just heard. But like, what do you know, if you were to project forward or just call out like, here's where I think the myths are, here's what I think the truths are, like what's going on from your perspective? Again, this is your area of expertise, so.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think part of the problem that we're having when we as game devs talk to, now I'm in this new world where I'm on the other side of the conversation. And so I can see we're kind of talking past each other when we have
Hmm.
the conversations about AI. And I think that's the number one friction point here. For game developers, they've been not only building AI, for a long time, but they've been on the forefront of things like reinforcement learning, training agents to play games. Like that's a known quantity in game dev, and it's a known thing that people have been working on for a long time.
Hmm.
So I think that when people like me come in from a marketing perspective and talk about AI, and they're lumping reinforcement learning to train bots and agents, like smarter NPCs and dynamic worlds, and all the other things that kind of get lumped into this, you have an inherent conflict because you're not really talking about the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think that on the one hand, game devs have already been building AI before the rest of the world, the sales forces of the world, put $10 million in Matthew McConaughey behind it to talk about it, right?
Right, yeah.
So they already embraced it because they were already doing it. Like I
Hmm.
have so many friends at different companies, like Nvidia's on the forefront of this, right? The reinforcement learning for games, because if you can build better bots, you can have better games, right? Like everyone who's built multiplayer games knows that bots are the only solution to a lot of matchmaking problems.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
it's great for first time users. It's great for matchmaking in areas where there aren't many people, like your friend, did you say was in Trinidad?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
the reality is that playing against bots might have been the only option for that person, which isn't fun to know, but like you can backfill lobbies. Like there's a bunch you can do with that. Game companies are already building this. They've been building it with decision trees and pathfinding algorithms. Now they're layering in machine learning and reinforcement learning to train the bots to be better, to make them more realistic and human-like, to make them indistinguishable from other players. Because like killing a bot doesn't hit the same as killing a real person,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
in a game. So like
Totally.
that kind of thing for a player is impactful. So I think we need to give game devs the due credit. They've already been doing this. They've been doing it for a long time. They didn't need it reskinned into some new
Hmm.
fancy technology word and put on a Super Bowl ad. And then the generative AI piece, I think, needs to be a very carefully considered conversation. So, like, to make NPCs better, why wouldn't we? That would be
Hmm.
awesome. You don't, like, they could be more dynamic in the way that they speak and the way that they interact with players. But then there's a technical question: how do you do that? Where do you do the
Yeah.
inference, right?
Yeah.
You can't just ship a proprietary LLM and put it on someone's PS5. Like, you don't want to put your model weights on someone's computer. That's basically giving them your code for your Like, that's why OpenAI doesn't let you download their model. Like, why would they do that? That's their money maker, are those model weights. So you can't just put it on someone's computer. So you have to do the inference somewhere else. How? Where? Why? When? That's a crazy interesting question. Make it fast, make it snappy so it's in the moment. Like, those kinds of things are going to be hard to solve. And then you have the Gen AI for the game support stuff. That needs to be a more delicate conversation, right? Because the last thing we want is to put everyone who works in localization out of business. We don't want to have to lay off more people. We all work in game dev and we all see this, and it's alarming to us, the number of people who are getting laid off anyway.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a proponent of furthering that. I want to change the way that people work, though, right? Like, how can we support the localization teams with LLMs so that they're spot checking, or they're adding colloquial language that, like, the LLMs kind of don't grasp, or they don't understand sarcasm or tone or whatever. Those kinds of things, I think, help change the way that we work, but don't replace workers. So I guess the overarching theme of what I just said is I think we have 3 simultaneous conversations going on about AI, and we're all kind of missing each other in what we're discussing. And so there's an inherent friction there.
Just to try to summarize this, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so one is you bring AI to game devs, and to your point, I actually was the producer on a team called Team AI in, I think, 2012. So
yeah,
so like
it's a known thing
we've been
in the
doing
industry,
this
right?
for a minute.
It is not new.
Yeah, so game devs have been doing this for a minute. One, you missed the game devs who are going, hey, this isn't new to us. We've been messing with this for a long time. Then second, you have the space of how would Gen AI come in and support gameplay opportunity, like basically improvements or different even player experiences that might attract different types of folks. And then third, you have this as a supportive versus a destructive force to the game devs at large. As 3 separate issues, and they all get lumped into like AI, right? Like it's just yay AI, and that's it's
someone's
funny.
going to your boss and is trying to sell them something, and they're like,
yeah,
we're gonna do blah blah blah, and you're like, okay, these are 3 completely different problem sets. They're gonna take 3 completely different approaches. They're gonna solve 3 completely different things.
Right.
How do we prioritize? What do we care about? And you add in that inherent suspicion that game devs have about this stuff anyway, because I'm like that too. It's a recipe for conflict and conversation.
I was at GDC this year, and there were a lot of people pitching, we'll replace your QA with AI. And the thing that was interesting to me is there was never a game studio that was pitching. It was always some external that was like, we can QA your game with AI. And I'm going like, do you know what QA does in game dev?
Like how?
If QA is anything, it's a discernment function. And that's exactly what AI through LLMs don't do. They don't discern. I mean, we could already, to your point, we already have smoke tests.
Exactly.
Like we already have, test harnesses, and it auto boots up and runs through a set of, we've been doing that for a long time. I was working with teams that did that again,
that's
10
the
years
other
ago.
thing. Like, we keep missing each other in these conversations,
Yeah.
right? Because if someone who was actually a game dev was having this conversation, they wouldn't just be saying, oh, we're going to replace your entire QA stack, right? That's unreasonable. Never going to happen. Like, good luck.
Yeah.
Part of what we're doing too is we're testing on every hardware combination. Like, okay, show me your bot that runs on literally every single hardware configuration that we have with our game testers.
Yeah.
And the problem that we see, right? Like, a lot of this is done with reinforcement learning. What these people fail to understand in those conversations is like, okay, so the game, especially before beta, and you know this very well, is changing extraordinarily rapidly. You're adding new mechanics, you're changing things. Like, things are actually making it in the game that you didn't think were going to make it in. Features are changing. Everything's going crazy. If it takes you a week to train a new agent,
no.
The time to replace QA is too long, and you need gameplay from QA to teach AI how to play the game. So you're in this chicken and egg scenario,
Yeah.
And it's funny because there are opportunities here. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no problem is unsolvable. Like you just mentioned smoke tests. I think that's a great opportunity. I think having smarter AI that sits alongside QA and learns as they play, as new features get added, is a net win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you will always have then, you can have from those small interactions, you can 10x the number of entities you have playing your game at any given time. You're not
Mm-hmm.
replacing any of the humans, you're just able to do more. So having that as part of your test workflow isn't a bad thing. But we're talking past each other because
Yeah.
vendors are making promises that they don't even know they can't deliver on. And so
Right.
they get laughed
Right.
out of these conversations because
Well,
they sound ridiculous.
and I think one of the things that's scary as are you going to manage to sell this to somebody who actually doesn't have experience in doesn't like didn't talk to their CTO or didn't talk
Mm-hmm.
to anybody like, hey, engineering manager or senior engineer, can you come over and like just evaluate what this person just said and let me know what's true and what's false? They just go like, wow, that would be amazing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is one of the things in which AI kind of ties back into the first conversation we were having about juniors, because AI is viewed. There's the same thing is happening in that, oh, short term, this looks like a potential positive ROI for my company. If I just bring in AI, then I don't need to hire as many people. That's best case. Worst case is I bring in AI and then I get to fire a bunch of people, right? And that lowered my burn rate. This is great. And again, not aware of like you can't actually do what they claim you can do, because they
Mm-hmm.
don't understand what you're trying to do, nor do you, and you didn't have anybody to ask, or you just didn't ask them. And now you're going to be in this like, congratulations, you made a short term, 1 quarter bump on ROI or whatever. But long term, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like, that is to me the really scary thing, because there's these people are figuring out, how do I market this to the folks who have financial decision making authority? Like, that's the problem they're trying to solve, and it's a very short sighted problem, but it could be a very profitable one, and it could look good again at the consequence of the future.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I mean, it's crazy because it really does tie these two threads together. We have execs openly saying, like, oh, we don't have to hire junior engineers anymore. We have AI. It's like, do you think all your senior engineers are going to stay the same forever? Like, I don't know about you guys. I am getting older. Like, that's just a hard truth of the world. So what happens in 20 years when all your senior engineers are retiring?
Yeah.
Where are the rest of them coming from? How are you replenishing them? Because if no one's hiring junior engineers, like, what is I don't even understand how you say that without realizing that there's an inherent catch-22 within the
Well,
statement.
I wonder if and again, this is where I get different people, different perspectives. Is AI on an exponential curve of effectiveness? If so, by the time we reach 20 years from now, if someone believes that, they go like, I'll just have AI that are that much better. I won't need any engineers anymore. And I
Mm-hmm.
know there's people that are on that track. The data I've seen seems to show that AI might be on a logarithmic curve, but an exponential power curve, which is not good. But power comes down over time. We solve that technically. But it makes me go like, and I'm not saying it's a permanent logarithmic curve. I'm sure there will be new innovations that figure things out. I wonder if that's like, hey, one, that's 20 years from now's problem. I don't care. Because I think in terms of quarters or 1 year. That's as far out as I get to go, just based on the market. And is it just that maybe I think the AI will keep up? I think it won't. I think, again, the thing that we don't have through AI is that discernment function. Like, if I don't have a senior engineer such as yourself or one of your peers there to evaluate what the AI is doing, how can I trust it when I'm trying to put this on millions of players' computers all around the world and expect it to run stably and not be exploitable and like all these different things? Like, it's the way game
Remote
is.
code executions everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you going? What do you? I don't see it. I say this and I realize that, some people are like, he's a Philistine or a Luddite, but like, I don't see it ever reaching that point where it can replace the discernment of the expert human. And again, what we were talking about earlier, the expert QA. But I think people buy that. I think they go like, oh, I'll just not hire. Like I've seen that same thing. It's so frustrating to me. I'm not going to hire. We're done hiring juniors. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, are you serious? You're just, that's it. I'm just going to have senior people. I think we should have a separate conversation about the difference in value that seniors versus juniors bring. We could maybe talk about that in a second. But just like you were saying, even 5 years down the road, what if somebody snipes your best people?
They are. They constantly are, right?
And they will. Now you've got what? A bunch of AI bots? Like,
Yeah.
I can just see a company that was like, we'll never need more than 10 senior engineers, and they slowly lose, and there's one engineer and just like a million bots.
One sad guy left.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just
At least
trying
you
to figure it out.
Trauma dump freely. On
There you go.
AI.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
care.
No.
But I think we answered our own question in this conversation, in that like there is no incentive to care about the long term. Herein lies the tragedy of the commons. All we care about is short-term stock gains. Most of these companies we're discussing are publicly traded, wherein they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders 1 to 2 quarters in advance. People want to make money right now. They don't care about 20 years from now, right? They want to think you're thinking about it. Like, that makes everyone feel good. I've got a plan. It's going to be great forever. But it's all smoke and mirrors past a quarter or two. And everyone inherently kind of knows that. None of these execs are going to be around to see, right? It's like, I don't know, what makes anyone act altruistically towards the planet? I guess there's nothing. Like, we see it all day, every day. You can threaten people and say, well, your kids are going to have a bad time, but if you're not primed to care about that, you're not going to care either way. So, like, what do you care about the theoretical future where your engineering team is like one sad dude who's like juggling a million AI bots that are like going rogue? Who cares?
The AI bots start mentoring each other. Yeah.
Not my problem.
Right. Yeah, I'll retire and take my golden parachute.
Yeah. Like, seriously?
No, it's interesting because I teach leadership and best production practices, and it's something that falls into this bucket. Sorry to make this about me for a second, but just it's this, like, everybody would say they value leadership. Oh yeah, I want to have great leaders. I want to have great producers, and most don't know what production does. Couldn't tell me, like, what is it that do your producers know what they're supposed to be doing? Have you given them like some understanding of, oh, this is your role, this is how you fit inside of the disciplines? Most producers don't know that. Most companies don't really know that.
They just say, go put out fires.
Yeah, they say, go put out, make the team better. Magic, do producer magic stuff, and talk to the other producers if you need to figure out how, because some of them know how. I don't know which ones. Go.
Hopefully they'll mentor you.
Right, exactly, yeah. And I think about that, and the thing I've said before is people care about leadership like they care about starving children in the third world, in that it's like it's popular to care about it. It's like, and again, I'm not saying people don't care about that, but it's that as soon as you ask the question, are you going to put any resources behind that? Are you going to put any time or are you going to like have somebody, if you're at the executive level, like create an initiative to drive change there to make this better? The answer is not really, because to your point, I got to worry about the next 2 quarters. Like that's the time frame I'm operating in. And that trap is something that I do see an advantage to the privately held companies out there, because they get to think about culture in the longer term. They get to think about, what would it look like for me to be set up to succeed 10 years from now or 20 years from now, so that there was a thing we used to say at Riot, which is like, I want my grandkids playing League of Legends, right? And it not exactly, but it was this idea of, look, we want this game to keep going. We want it to continue to be fun and compelling. We want to keep building on it. And I would say that Call of Duty has already done that in a multi-generational way, of creating an experience and continuing to create and refine it, and like hitting multiple generations. And there are other games that have pulled this off. And like, imagine that. Imagine, you were a grandparent, you got to play a game that you used to play when you were a kid with your grandkids. It sounds kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I have so many friends who play now, like Call of Duty, with their,
Yeah.
Not
Once,
children, because it's not for kids, but
right, right. Well,
older children.
there is this idea of like I want my, if I'm in a game studio, I want my studio to some extent to outlive me. And it is, yeah, it is the advantage. Do they know what to do in this? Or do they end up copying the behavior that they see of the people that are chasing, the famously said like shareholder value frame? And if you were to give advice to those leaders, I guess in both cases, but especially for the privately held ones, because they really might be able to drive change, like how would you advise them around the stuff we've been talking about?
It's hard because I get the same sense that you do from my friends who work at the bigger privately held companies and even the smaller ones that there is still, and I guess not still, there is a passion there that is allowed to thrive that sometimes gets stifled when you're talking about working in the public sphere and in a public market. And I think that the beauty of passion is that we all who have worked in games or who want to work in games deeply understand what that means, right? Like, we know why we got into making games. For me, I grew up playing video games actually with my mom. Like,
Hmm.
I'm an only child. It was like the most fun. It was the way I socialized. It was like a big part of my identity as a young girl and now, as an adult has been centered around games and the experiences I had and the narratives and just everything about it. And when you say that to someone else who works in the space, they understand that. That's why we do it. Like,
Hmm.
the passion tax is a joke for a reason, right? Because all of us are willing to do these things that are so hard, to do the live operations that is grueling and never ending, to go through betas and go through launches and like put your heart and soul on the line sometimes to fans that don't like what you did because we're passionate about it, because we care. And so I think that the good news for all of gamers in the industry and game dev is that that passion has been so far impossible to kill from what I've seen
Hmm.
through downturns, through layoffs, through uncertainty, through everything, because all of us have a very personal reason and a very deep reason for why we do what we do. And it's really, really hard to kill that passion. Not that you should try to.
Right. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
arguing the opposite.
Yeah.
But I think the good news is that that still exists. And it is going to be hard to kill, regardless of what happens, regardless of hiring practices, regardless if we're doing the right things by our leaders and by our juniors and by anything and everything and all of the above. Because at the end of the day, we all know why we're doing it, and it's usually very personal. And then we all come together as well. Like, I know what it feels like to be on live ops with my fellow engineers, and like that time spent where like, I hate to be corny because I worked on a military-esque game, but like it felt like you're in the trenches together. You are fighting a battle together. You know who you can rely on. And like we all understand that camaraderie like viscerally. The people you can call at 2 a.m. when like shit has hit the fan, right? And that they'll be there and have your back and that you'll do the same for them. And so I think that that spirit for all of us is what makes games continue to get made. Why we still have such awesome narratives. We still have so many creatives. We still have so many amazing things coming out of the industry.
Hmm.
Because despite I think all of these external pressures and mistakes and all of the missteps, all of the hardships, there still is awesome stuff happening in the game industry, and it's because people care. And it's going to be hard to get them to stop. And so I'd say, like, to all leaders, if you're doing this and you're stoking those passions, like, good on you.
Hmm.
Let people continue to do what they're passionate about and have some compassion towards them as well, right? Like, you don't want to lay off your entire QA team because you got AI. You just want to make them better. Like, don't make people's lives harder. Like, they're here for you fighting every day. Like,
Hmm.
step up for them and protect them. And then to the people who are fighting against the shareholders and having to be very short-sighted and, whatever because they need to make money and they need to get in the next earnings call and have a good story. Like, don't forget that the people that you're truly representing aren't just your shareholders, it's all the people that work for you, who
Hmm.
look up to you and who are here because they give a shit, because there are so many industries where your employees will not care.
Yeah.
This is one of the few where people care deeply and don't take that for granted.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Um, all right, I want to jump over to that aside. Uh, we we've talked about the lack of hiring of juniors, and that's so multifaceted. There's COVID, remote, a lot more talent coming in. There's AI, all these different things. I know some people, and obviously they've been very vocal on LinkedIn. You see one of these posts every day, or you did for a little bit. Like, I just laid off all my juniors. I'm not hiring anything but seniors and supporting them with AI, and that's how I'm going to be. And so there's some people who believe that the right thing to do is to hire nothing but senior people. My experience in game dev is that every time a major studio or publisher has tried to assemble nothing but the best into a team, we'll take nothing but our most senior seniors and we'll pull them all together, that thing has been a failure. Yeah. And I think this is the counterpoint perhaps in a different way, because I can make an argument. I understand the financial argument for the senior. Basically, pay goes up more logarithmically in most crafts, while output does go up somewhat exponentially. So I tend to have to pay engineers a bit more, a bit more, a bit more. But to your point, like a really good senior engineer architect is worth a lot of junior mid-level engineers in terms of just how much impact they can have on the health of the code, the effectiveness of the code. That part. So if I look at it like, again, pure sort of financial numbers ROI thing, it's like, okay, I understand why I want to have fewer of these very high-powered individuals. And yet, when we bring all those high-powered individuals together, which again, I've seen attempted multiple times in multiple studios, they don't tend to make the best game, which is what they're supposed to do. We've got all the best people together. Why don't they make the best game? And so I want to talk about like the value of juniors besides just like, well, they're cheaper, or well, someday I want them to become a senior. And I'm curious your take on that, because I have a friend, I have a great leader I know, and he has said for years, I'm not fully on him with this, I'm somewhere in the middle, but he said like, I would take a full team of like juniors fresh out of college who were just so hungry and so passionate to go try to build something, then you give me all the veterans who've been doing it for 20 years and are set in their ways. I would just so much prefer to work with that other team with the juniors, because I think we'd be more likely to make something amazing, even if we made a bunch of stupid mistakes along the way. So again, I'm not quite there, but that perspective also exists. I don't think it gets much airtime. I think it probably should get more. I'm somewhere in the middle, because I've seen experts pull off some amazing things and save projects that I just don't think a junior team would have been able to do. But there's my spiel. Why should people hire juniors? Hey, leaders and game devs, if you love what we do here at Building Better Games, imagine what we could create with your support. By joining our Patreon, you help us bring deeper insights, develop better training, and host more expert discussions to level up your leadership and game development skills. Plus, as a patron, you're going to get exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early access to episodes, and a chance to ask your burning questions directly to us. Join now and help us build better games together.
I think the answer is so obvious when you think about any experience you've had explaining something to somebody else, whether they're a junior or whatever, right? If you're trying to explain to someone your great grandmother's cookie recipe, right? Like it's just something real, who cares? Something trivial. The best way to learn and the best way to ask questions about, wait, why do we do it this way, is to have to show somebody else and then have them try to do it and see what happens. Then you might have them pick up the cookie recipe and they forget something. They forget the baking soda or something, and you realize, oh, that's because it was written here or written like this and it wasn't very clear. So let's actually modify this process so that that mistake doesn't get made again, because having fresh eyes look at something is so valuable. And I see that even now, right? Like I've moved into this new space where I'm actually helping have the conversations from the vendor perspective about why you should use Databricks for your game dev data and AI needs, right? What we can bring to the table. And I'm having to look at all of the existing processes that we have, a lot of which are amazing and very good, but I'm asking questions like someone who doesn't know what they're doing because I don't. And that illuminates a lot of things that maybe weren't thought about or maybe were taken for granted. Because when you get entrenched into a problem space, you really kind of lack the ability to have that set of fresh eyes and that set of, just the way you think about something differently. And I think with junior engineers, you get exactly that. You test your processes to make sure that they are robust, that they make sense, that what you're doing is actually like worthwhile. Like, did you accidentally add a whole bunch of bureaucracy you don't need? I can't imagine anyone at any game studio being mad about being told that something they do is unnecessarily bureaucratic and needs to be changed. Because we all experience those things, but sometimes it takes a newbie coming through to really highlight, like, oh, that's dumb. Why do we do that? And those are net wins for people. And that's just one example. That stuff happens everywhere, and setting up a new code environment for a newbie, like they could figure out something that's maybe faster, makes more sense, or like we've been doing it this way for so long because this is how we do it. And I have in mind a couple of game studios that I very much think of when I think of this. I'm not going to say who, but there are a couple studios when I think of that dream team of senior engineers that you're talking about coming together, and I think about what they look like, and I think about the games that they're not putting out, the waves that they're not making anymore. When you used to be a legacy powerhouse and now it's like, what is going on over there? And it's because you have the butting of heads of people who are entrenched in their ways, who, why would we do anything different? This worked for us 5 years ago. Well, it might not work anymore. And then where's your passion? Well, now you don't have any wins. So now no one is incentivized to continue winning, because it's really hard to not be getting, like we're all in this because we like to work and we like fast paced. And if you're not getting those wins, then you get into this death spiral of like, we're going to fight about process. We're going to fight about the way we're doing this. We're going to fight about the best way. And we're not actually going to produce anything. And then we're going to be bummed because we haven't produced. And then it's going to continue and it's this death spiral. And so I think, in my opinion, junior engineers introduce kind of a forcing function into the whole thing to actually take a deep look at what you're doing, why you're doing it, could you do it better? And they force you to think about new technology too. Game devs are at the edge, I think, of all new technology, but I also think that we have, because we're constantly being forced to do that, we have this inclination as well to just hold on to the stuff that works, like for dear life, and just be like, please don't take my things that I understand away from me. Like everything else is always changing and this is my security blanket. Like I just love Jira. Like it's the thing that makes me happy.
My gosh, yeah.
And if someone's like, but there's a better way, you're like, shut up. I don't want to hear about it. Like I hear about the better way all day. I've given up every single thing that makes me feel safe. And this is the thing you cannot touch. Keep your hands off of it. And I think that is a natural human reaction to what we do when we are on all the time, having to change, having to iterate, having to deliver. And having juniors around though forces you. Sometimes you just got to let that go. Because you're going to look at it, you're going to be like, ugh, they're right. This doesn't make sense. Let's switch to Notion. Let's switch to something new that the kids are using. All the kids are on, whatever. Let's use Discord. Screw it. Like, fine. And it ends up being better. And you're like, all right, well, I was scared for no reason, but it's a natural human inclination. And so I think that's what I've seen. Like the best teams that utilize junior engineers are really forcing themselves to be introspective and to do things in a different way, even though they might not want to or even need to, but eventually it ends up being a win. And you don't get that if you're hiring the same people doing the same things every day. And that's not to say seniors can't be innovative.
Yeah. I think this goes much broader than engineering as well. There's something behind what you're saying that I appreciate and that I think companies need to take more seriously, which is also what you're implying is that you need to also respect the junior opinion. I see a lot of studios that are, even as part of this idea of I could replace my juniors with AI, or I don't need juniors anymore, I can just hire seniors because they're so available because of all the layoffs or anything like this. It's like what is coming through is you don't respect those new eyes. You don't respect the person who's going to ask the stupid question that might actually be really smart. Excuse me. Because everybody else is just used to that being the way it is. and having the junior come in, like even like an artist, just go like, well, couldn't we just blah, and have everybody go like, oh. And again, if you're not willing to do that, if your answer is like, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, you're here to learn, pay attention, and someday you get to have an opinion, then you won't benefit from this anyway. And I do see why, like, yeah, if that's the view you have on juniors, I understand why you don't want to hire them, why if you do hire them, they probably don't want to stay there and they're not going to learn very much, you know. Like, there's all this stuff that's happening there. And you just basically put forward the stance of, if you are willing to bring in the people that have less experience, but then actually, you know, you don't just let them run the show, but you pay attention to the things that they're observing, and you balance those fresh eyes against your existing blind spots you didn't even know were there. They have a lot of value to add, because they are willing to try stupid things.
You know what's interesting as we talk about this that I'm very viscerally aware of? Leadership is willing to pay big money for these opinions. That's why consultants exist. They're supposed to come in and do this. And so it's not that people don't value this insight, and it's not that they're not willing to pay for this insight. They are. They just don't realize that they can get it for a lot cheaper and in a way that's going to help them and the industry in the long run without shelling out even more money to KPMG. Like, or, you know, McKinsey, or whomever your favorite consultancy is. And nothing against those people either, right? They provide a lot of value, which is why they get paid a lot of money. Sure. But if you can get some of that value just from hiring new people into your organization and listening to them and empowering them to ask questions, why would you not at least supplement your, you know, whatever you're willing to pay for and, you know, your change making and
change management system,
your change management, why not supplement that with something that's actually going to be a net benefit?
Well, and I can say this, and I say this perhaps to my own detriment as a consultant in the games industry, but one, that's spot on. Two, one of the biggest problems I encounter as a consultant is not, I'm able to spot many of those things, and my experience helps me perhaps spot them more rapidly because I've had more exposure to more things over a number of years, but I'm not there. And so I don't live it every day like your team does. And if you have a junior person who comes in and is actually passionate about solving a problem, I honestly, it's like, yeah, I can help you solve it, but they can also see it and potentially solve it themselves. Like, all I can do is try to help you solve it. Because if I solve it myself, I am now a single point of failure that's not even part of your company. To that solution, versus having somebody there who is actually like, oh, I see this problem. Oh, okay, what could you do about it? Oh, I might do this. Okay, look, you solved it. Now it's solved. Now it's solved.
I'm sure some of the healthiest companies you come in to help are the ones who are looking to find inefficiencies and change and are looking in many different ways to do that. So they're looking to someone like you to support the things that they probably already know but maybe need a fresh set of eyes on or some sort of confirmation on. But if they do their homework and they already kind of know where to look, it makes your life a lot easier. And having a team of people who is constantly mentoring and learning, and you've got interns and juniors and you have people coming in, you have fresh eyes, makes the job that you know you'll inevitably have to do anyway, which is introduce some changes, a lot easier, because an organization then is primed to want to do that. The senior engineers are okay implementing the change, right? What's the worst thing that can happen as a consultant? You have all these ideas and then you get sabotaged because people don't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually a really common, even for the McKinseys and the Deloittes and those Bains, all like, that is one of the biggest frustrations, because you will go in, and one of the things that I do when I do like a game dev readiness audit, like, are you ready to ship your game? I try to talk to everybody at every layer, because it is so interesting how different the perspective can be between different layers of an organization, and I think that's only become more so in a remote world, because it's harder for us to have communication between the layers. Like, we sort of recognize we need to talk among ourselves as the C-suite or among ourselves as the directors group or whatever, but like, the jumps are tricky. And so I go in and I talk to those people, and it is so fascinating how much insight can come from, I'm a new person, I'm a new producer, I just showed up and I'm seeing these things. And like, it's just unreal how much, they haven't been there that long, But whoa, they're putting some pieces together that when I reflect that back to the director group or the senior leadership team or something, that senior leadership group or director team goes like, oh wow, that's so true. And I'm like, it's almost, I haven't thought about this in this way before, but almost to say, hey, without your junior and new people, I wouldn't have known that either. Like they were
Mm-hmm.
the ones who helped me put that together and frame that way. That thing that you saw is like, that is so obviously the problem that we're facing that we hadn't articulated it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm actually enjoying that. Right, I haven't been new at a company in a very long time, and being new right now, I'm really like living that day to day, and I'm forgetting how much I liked being in that space.
Yeah. Maybe that's a takeaway for leaders listening is that idea of, hey, are you taking seriously both the junior talent you have that don't know how to do it right now, but that do have a perspective? Are you valuing that perspective? And are you, to what you just said, are you mimicking that attitude of, I like being told maybe something I'm doing is bad because
Mm-hmm.
that gives me an opportunity to improve? Or do I reject that? Do I turn away from that? Do I try to run the other way?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people like to think that they can handle feedback well until provided it like by someone that maybe they don't expect to hear from. So
Yeah.
getting feedback that have a blind spot from your CFO when you're the CEO, it's different than if someone at a conference in the hallway, a junior producer tells it to you.
Right.
And like, how do you check your ego to say, oh, in fact, that opinion's probably even better than the people I interact with on a daily basis because they're not in the rooms I'm in.
Yeah.
They're not exposed to the information I'm exposed to. Now, they probably don't have the whole story, right? And that's totally fine, right?
Yeah.
Synthesize the full picture from all the pieces of data that you're getting, but don't discount it just because it feels like maybe it shouldn't be coming from there, or that person shouldn't have an opinion, or like they should just be grateful to have a job, or whatever things roll through your head when you're kind of pushing back at some sort of criticism.
So you're working at Databricks now, and for a long time you have been on the dev side. Suddenly you're in third party land. You're trying to reach out to game dev companies. What is that like?
It's interesting. It's actually fun because I've been on the other side of the table for so many years that I understand that it's not personal. It's not, it is what it is when it comes to people delegating their time. And so every
Mm-hmm.
conversation I have, I'm very, very much aware that they'd probably rather be somewhere else. Um, but it's fun because I'm in a space that I've always liked being in, which is helping people solve their problems with data. And I started at Call of Duty doing that. That was, why I was hired. I was hired as a data scientist there, as a senior, not as a junior. Someone else already trained me, but as a senior data scientist, and figuring out how to not only dig into our data, but storytell with what's going on was something that I was super passionate about and earned me a bunch of promotions because come to find out I was pretty good at it. And so now that I sit on the other side of the table, it's funny because I feel like I can speak the language of the people I'm talking to, and I can very much empathize with where they're at. And I don't know that I would want to do this job to any other industry. Because if I didn't
Mm.
understand my customers' like perspective very viscerally, I
Yeah.
don't know that I could actually do my job effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought of selling people something that one, I don't believe in, and two, like doesn't actually fit their needs makes me very uncomfortable. Um, so now I'm like, okay, I feel like I can understand their problems, and even if they don't end up using Databricks, I get to have a lot of conversations with a lot of different gaming companies and a lot of different kinds of people and just hear about their problems and talk about the hardest problems that they face. And that's always what got me through the day, like working on Call of Duty for so many years. Like I just chased the hardest problem. I was like a dog with a car, you know? And now I get to do that, but I'm doing that across companies. And
Mm-hmm.
it's super fun and rewarding, more so than I would have originally thought.
You've opened up a can of worms there because now I'm really curious. Like, what are the hardest problems or problem? Like, if you were to try to amalgamate or see, like, what's come up? That
I would say that the hardest problems facing the game industry right now are honestly like player retention understanding what your players are doing, understanding who your players are, understanding where they are, how to meet them where they are, right? There's this whole like game development, publishing and everything, right? Like any other industry, it's this machine. There's a marketing component. There like it touches everything. And unless you have a comprehensive view of your entire game ecosystem and all of your players, and you really have this 360-degree view of everyone, it's almost impossible to answer any one question without there being a bunch of asterisks next to it. And so I think the hardest problems I'm seeing are how do you get all that data in one place so that you can understand your game from top to bottom, get that 360-degree view, and then once you have it, what do you do with it?
Hmm.
What is your biggest problem? Like for me, it's like player retention, player churn, player engagement, player like marketing, personalization, recommendation systems, all of the above. But the basic problem is that we don't have a single source of truth for all of our game data. And without that, we can't even begin to answer the questions that everyone has. But with where do you start?
Yeah. You almost have to be like cutting across multiple different databases and different teams, trying to pull everything together.
The joins, the multiple tools, the pulling things together, the emailing CSVs back and forth. That it's a fun problem to solve because I've lived that. I not necessarily I'm proud. The data maturity for Call of Duty was amazing, and it's where I learned a lot of this stuff. They have an amazing data engineering team. But some of the other industries I've worked in where you were emailing PowerPoints, I worked at a company that used PowerPoint as a database. Like, that is not a lie. So,
Was it a bunch of producers, though? Was it just like the team health scores? No.
It was marketers. I love my marketing friends, but they know when they do that.
I've got to say, like, as a producer, I've definitely seen on the production side. Okay, here's last quarter's slide, and here's the scores, and here's this one's, and you're just like, oh no. Okay, if we can look back, I guess it's fine. It won't be hard. No. Anything else you want to say about anything there related to Databricks, that shift from again dev side to third party? Anything else that comes to mind for you?
I think honestly the biggest thing for me that I'm learning right now is that I do get to live in this space where I'm asking questions. So I'm asking questions internally at Databricks, trying to understand why we do things the way that we do, how we talk to our customers, how we meet them where they're at. But I also get to do that and ask those questions at other companies, right? So there is, although I do have a lot of experience, right, and I was in game dev for a long time, I do come with my own perspective. Coming to these conversations where we talk about your data architecture, your data infrastructure, having that set of fresh eyes, even if you don't buy Databricks, it's nice because I actually don't really get paid whether you buy or not, which is great for me. So I don't have to stress that. So I get to just be a trusted advisor to companies. But having that fresh set of eyes where I'm just kind of asking you questions and we're figuring stuff out together is really rewarding because they can end up doing or building their own thing. Like I've done that too. I've built, talked to people about tools and been like, I'll build my own. And I respect that too because that's the spirit of why we get into game dev. A lot of us like to just home grow stuff and get it done. But it's fun to be that perspective and to have those conversations. And sometimes to be a place for people to vent. They inherit a system that they don't like a data warehouse that they think is not good, and they get to just vent for 30 minutes and be like, so how do we fix it? And I'm like, come at me. You can trauma dump, and then we will fix your stuff, and we'll be right as rain.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. With that, I think we'll wrap up. I want to give you a chance to plug anything you want to plug. If you're okay with it, we'll put your LinkedIn at least down in the show notes. Anything else you want to add down there and say now to just places people should go, stuff they should check out?
Totally, yeah. I actually write a decent amount. I'm trying to write more on Substack. So LinkedIn, I put, shorter form content. Almost all of it is written because I prefer to write, and I think people prefer to consume my written content because you can kind of come back to it or whenever you're feeling less annoyed by the way that I write. You can digest it at your own pace. And so Substack is where I'm transitioning to do a little bit longer form content. So I talk a
Okay.
lot about game development. I came from the network engineering side, server infrastructure kind of stuff, and security. So I write a decent amount about that. But I also write about leadership, management, problems I see with, I most recently wrote about meetings and how like meetings are killing productivity. I was inspired by Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan. He put out a shareholder thing that was like, basically we need to stop having meetings. And so I write a lot about, my perspective on those kinds of things as well. So if you're interested in game dev, leadership, and general rants and ravings and data and AI, like come join me on Substack.
Fantastic. All right. That link will be down in the show notes as well. Carly, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin. It was super fun.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Here's my major takeaways from that episode. So first, our exclusive focus on hiring senior engineers over a well-rounded team makes sense when you look at it through a short-term financial lens. But it's already causing problems, and I believe there's more to come down the road. Second, in engineering, and probably in other disciplines as well, we run the risk of eventually running out of experienced, knowledgeable senior talent to pull from. And that faces a potential loss of discipline knowledge unlike anything we've experienced in the past. And if you're relying on AI to bridge that gap, I don't think it will. Third, this loss of knowledge, the lack of hiring juniors, is additionally problematic because as you fail to invest in junior talent, you also fail to develop the skill set of mentoring and training junior talent to allow them to grow and develop. We may be creating not just a generation of devs that will slowly age out, but also that don't know how to work together well, that don't know how to mentor and help each other out. Fourth, AI is nothing new to games. When you think about it, this isn't some revelation to us. We've been playing with different types of AI for a long time in many ways. But the way AI has been packaged recently is running the risk of conflating too many things together and failing to actually understand what is possible and what's not. Fifth, we aren't taking seriously the simple technical challenges involved in using Gen AI in games. The problems aren't intuitive or discussed enough because we're all distracted either by hating AI or hyping it. Sixth, our approach to junior talent and our approach to AI are both pointing to a short-term obsession. If we don't adjust, massive pain is coming, and perhaps it's already showing up. Seventh, on the positive note, game devs remain passionate despite all these challenges. That passion continues and strives forward, and it does still make game dev one of the best places to work. Eighth, one of the core values junior talent bring is a different perspective and a willingness to challenge the status quo. This is super useful at any company on any team. And finally, junior devs are one part of many ways to remove inefficiency, improve things, and reflect back the reality everyone else has slowly become acclimated and blind to. Don't skip them. Don't miss them. Don't fail to value that voice. All right. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.